When someone sneezes, we instinctively say, "Bless you." Why is that?
God bless you.
There's actually a really interesting story behind it. But first, what happens when we sneeze, and why do we do it? Imagine you're walking through the park on a breezy spring morning. It begins with a subtle itch, a whispering tickle deep within your nose. You pause, eyes narrowing, the sun is warm, your nose tingles, your eyes squint further, and before you can stop it, a sneeze erupts. Violent, instant, loud. People glance, you feel embarrassed. Maybe you mutter a sheepish sorry. It's funny, we think of sneezes as inconveniences. They might interrupt meetings, startle strangers on buses, and often leave us red-faced. But sneezes aren't flaws, they're actually ancient protective reflexes. Sneezes are nature's emergency eject button. Sneezing is a protective mechanism, helping get rid of foreign bodies and irritants like viruses, bacteria, and other bugs. In essence, they protect you from potential harm, and they're triggered intentionally by the body. They're not glitches or failures, but designed responses. They're your body saying, something doesn't quite belong here. Here's how sneezing works. When the mucosal lining of your nose gets irritated, whether by allergens like pollen or dander or invaders like the flu or viruses, the alarm bells ring. At the heart of the reflex lies a nerve called the trigeminal nerve, the largest of the 12 cranial nerves. This nerve branches extensively across your face, transmitting sensory information from areas like the forehead, eyes, nose, cheeks, jaw, and the mucosal linings of the nose and mouth to the brain. When irritants, be it dust, pollen, or a sudden gust of cold air, stimulate the sensitive nasal mucosa, the trigeminal nerve sends urgent signals to the brainstem. The brain responds by orchestrating a coordinated response, a deep inhalation, closure of the glottis, buildup of intrathoracic pressure, and then a forceful expulsion of air through the nose and mouth. The sequence effectively ejects the offending particles from the respiratory tract. Things like allergens and microbes are fairly well-known sneeze inducers, but the reflex can also be triggered by more unusual stimuli. For example, some people experience sneezing when suddenly exposed to bright light, such as sunlight. One theory is that this results from cross-activation between the optic and trigeminal nerves. Some people might sneeze after consuming a large meal. This reflex termed snatiation combines sneeze and satiation, highlighting the link between stomach fullness and sneezing. And thirdly, emotional factors. Sometimes stress can provoke sneezing in certain individuals, underscoring the reflex's connection to the central nervous system. Now, another thing you might have been wondering, why do we close our eyes when we sneeze? Well, several theories offer plausible explanations. One theory is that it's part of a reflex. Sneezing is a highly coordinated reflex involving multiple cranial nerves, and the facial nerve's involvement may explain why eye closure happens. When an irritant stimulates the nasal mucosa and the trigeminal nerve sends a signal to the brainstem, a coordinated response is initiated, and among these responses is the involuntary closure of the eyes. This action is primarily mediated by the facial nerve, cranial nerve 7, which controls the muscles responsible for facial expressions, including the orbicularis oculi muscle that closes the eyelids. Another theory is that it's a protective mechanism, suggesting that we close our eyes to protect them from the expelled particles during a sneeze. Because, as you might well know, sneezes can eject up to tens of thousands of droplets at very high speeds. Speaking of droplets and high speeds, usually after you sneeze, you might feel a certain kind of way. If you've ever felt sheepish or worse, downright guilty after sneezing in a crowded room, a classroom, a train, or even at the grocery store, you're not alone. That awkward glance to see who noticed, the subconscious shuffle back into your seat, hoping nobody saw or breathed it in. Why do we feel like that? A sense of slight guilt, maybe. In one word, it comes down to spread. That sneeze, that quick burst of air, it doesn't just vanish. In fact, a single sneeze can launch a cloud of droplets, thousands of them. And depending on how forceful the sneeze is, Those droplets can travel as far as 30 feet or about 9 meters. That's the length of a small bus or nearly the width of an entire train carriage. So if you're sitting quietly in a crowded subway, a movie theater, or a classroom, and someone sneezes without covering up, even just once, those particles don't just fall to the ground. They linger, carried by currents of air, drifting invisibly through the space you're breathing in. And what's more, some of those droplets are microscopic, too small to see, too light to fall quickly, so they can float in the air for minutes or even hours, depending on the ventilation of the room. Now it makes a little bit more sense why a simple sneeze can make you feel that way. It's not just the noise, it's the implication that maybe, without meaning to, you've introduced something, bacteria, a virus, a trigger, into a shared space, something others now have to breathe in. That's why we instinctively apologize sometimes. Of course, a little sneeze etiquette helps. When you sneeze into a tissue or the crook of your elbow to protect those around you, you might hear someone kindly say, "Bless you." So why do we say "bless you"? Where did it come about? It's thought that this tradition dates back centuries to the time of the plague. During the Middle Ages, when the Black Death ravaged Europe, sneezing took on a deeply ominous meaning. In the time before germ theory, people didn't really understand what caused disease, but they could recognize its terrifying signs, and one of them was a sudden, forceful sneeze. Imagine a narrow cobblestone street in a plague-stricken village. The air is thick with fear. Families shutter their windows. Priests walk door to door swinging incense, and every cough, every wheeze, every sneeze feels like a threat. When someone sneezed, it wasn't just a bodily reflex, it was a dreaded sign. The bubonic plague, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, often began with symptoms resembling a cold or flu. Sneezing, along with fever and swollen lymph nodes, became an early and dreaded warning sign. It's no wonder then that when someone let out a sneeze, those around them would instinctively whisper, murmur, or exclaim, "God bless you." It was kind of more like a prayer. It was a plea for divine intervention in a world where medicine had few answers. "God bless you" was believed to shield the sneezer from death or protect others from being infected. Saying "God bless you" became as much a spiritual shield as a sign of compassion. Today, in office meetings or on crowded buses, a sneeze might erupt, and that would prompt a chorus of bless yous from strangers. But it is largely a societal nicety, a reflexive response ingrained in etiquette, rather than a literal declaration of divine protection. It serves as a polite acknowledgement of someone's sneeze, maintaining social harmony and expressing a moment of shared human love. Next time you sneeze, pause, smile, and thank your body.